again. Our next guest is a champion of Canada's automotive industry. I know you're thinking cars, but this man is behind a Canadian-built electric moonshot of a car. Flavio Volpe leads the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, APMA, which is Canada's national association representing original equipment suppliers to the worldwide automotive industry. Please join me in welcoming Flavio to the stage. Welcome.
This is the first time that the public is able to see what Avro's big new supersonic interceptor really looks like.
Hello, and thanks for having me. It's always great to follow the special effects guy. It's a little bit like singing after Taylor Swift. Today, I was asked last year to speak at the Campus Party global digital event about our industry's response to the COVID pandemic. What can car people do in the face of a global pandemic that shut the world down? Well, we stepped up to make things like the masks you're all wearing, face shields, ventilators, gowns, everything else that everybody needed to kind of beat back the pandemic. But what we were working on in the background is, like our host said, a moonshot. I represent 300 companies that make parts for cars that are made in North America and all over the world. In Canada, that means Fords, General Motors, Chryslers, Toyotas, Hondas, but really we ship parts everywhere. We're making parts for Teslas in Stratford. We're making systems for Rivians and Ferraris in Montreal and Quebec. We are working with artificial intelligence leaders in Toronto for Uber and machine learning leaders for Honda here in Montreal. We make every single part of every single system in every single car in the world, and we don't have a Canadian automaker. And as we all grow into a world where we are conscious of climate and our responsibilities within it, how do car people help contribute to a greener future? We spent a few years, 2017, 18, 19, negotiating with the crazy president of the United States on a new NAFTA. And we were at the forefront of that. And within that, what we did was negotiate new rules on how much of an electric vehicle or a zero-emission vehicle should come from North America. I knew intrinsically that north of here and in Northern Ontario, we have the world's biggest deposits of resources like lithium and cobalt and graphite, and all those things are going to drive electric vehicles, battery manufacturing. We got invited by the Prime Minister to his throne speech in 2019, and he said, "I challenge you all to envision a Canada that is a zero emissions Canada in 2050, and go back to your own industries and see what you could do before that." Came back to the office and we said, all these companies, these technology companies, these metal stampers, these plastic melters, these tool makers, we have been demonstrating technology to automakers all over the world to go on their connected autonomous vehicles, but we don't have a Canadian automaker. And how do you get to a table if you don't have a ticket to that dinner to talk about what the future of zero-emission transport looks like if you are not in the game? So we decided in that moment that we were going to launch Canada's first ever 100% Canadian designed, engineered, and supplied zero emissions vehicle. I've got a second video, maybe it's queued up here. I give you a look at what we came up with. We set a challenge to the industry and to Canada at large. We said, let's do a Team Canada project. Yes, we make cars in Ontario, but we make all kinds of new technology across the country. And we thought that if we're going to create a platform that is a lighthouse for Canada to be able to take its place at the climate change table in the transportation sector, we wanted to ask the next generation. We set up a design competition in January of 2020. We launched it at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and we said, we're inviting post-secondary students across this country, the students, not the schools, to participate in a design competition. We gave them a brief. We said the fastest growing segment in the market is CUVs. It is also the biggest contributor and growing contributor to what we think is the carbon footprint of the transportation fleet in this country and around the world. We said we wanted designs that evoked Canada, and we gave them a brief, and we gave them a design jury that was headed by the lead designer for Fiat Chrysler, a gentleman named Ralph Giles, who was born in Haiti, grew up in Montreal, sent some designs as a high school student, had his mother send designs to Chrysler, who immediately called him to Auburn Hills as a teenager and enrolled him in a great engineering and automotive school in Michigan upon graduation. And his first big work was the redesign of the Dodge Challenger and Charger and Chrysler 300 that gets built in Brampton, Ontario. A great Canadian story, both in demographic and in approach, but also someone who we think can have a nice view of, boy, the projects that have hit for me are the world's fastest cars, but probably the world's biggest carbon footprint. And asked him to anchor a design jury that had 26 submissions from across the country, everywhere from the Wilson School of Design in Richmond, BC, out to Dalhousie University. We narrowed that down to 9. We had a short list of 3, and the winning design was a group of industrial engineering students in Carleton. We launched an RFP, and we said I represent 200 or so companies. We said, who wants to come on this tour with us? Who wants to build a car with us? And at the time that we launched it, we had 93 companies signed up. I was hoping for 150. I said publicly we'd like to get to 200. That video said 300. Well, that video is dated by a couple of months. We have 438 companies from across the country that are in everything from design and special effects, like Jordan before us, right down to battery manufacturing. We're building a car. And the province of Quebec and the province of Ontario and the federal government have partnered with us. This car, we're making one car to demonstrate to the world that we can do every single component in Canada. But there's a lot of interest in maybe making that car a second car and a company that makes cars or makes the platforms or makes some of the intelligent design, the intelligent infrastructure systems that are going to guide the new world. Campus Party asked me to come here to talk about Project Aero. I think that was just the premise. I want to talk about our real electric future. 3 years ago, as I was trying to get Japanese investment, more Japanese investment in Canada, I went to see a company called Aishin in Hiroshima. And after I visited the Peace Dome, they took me to their museum, and in the Aishin Museum, was a 1912 Detroit electric vehicle. And it was the #1 vehicle by volume in the taxi business in New York in 1912. I said, well, why is it here? Well, the batteries from that vehicle came from Hiroshima, from Aishin. And it focused for me that electric vehicle technology is not new. It is a decision that we made as a planet in the developing countries on what's the cheapest way to get people around. In the teens and the 20s, we decided that the energy packed into 1 gallon of gasoline was going to be more expensive and more reliable than acid batteries that American companies imported from Japan. And so we went this way. Well, for us to come back here, I think it's pretty easy. I think we all understand that electric vehicles and the way that the difference between an engine and a motor is that we're taking one thing that is a bunch of controlled explosions inside a cast metal, and we're replacing it with an electromagnet that spins. There's hundreds of parts, there's dozens of parts. We're taking a 10-speed transmission and we have a 1-speed e-gear. We have a battery. You know, for those of you who drove here or took public transit here or have a car, you have a 12-volt battery. You turn a key or you press a button, it starts a 40-volt system. That 40-volt system powers your phone, your radio, your windows. But in a 100-kilowatt Tesla Model S, that battery, that you press that button, powers 800 volts. What is the future of transportation? We like to use the term electric vehicle, and if I read this morning that a company, a pickup truck company, an electric pickup truck company called Rivian, that was invested in heavily by Ford and by Amazon, is about to go public, and their target IPO is $70 billion of market cap. What does that mean? How does that compare? Well, that's as big a market cap as Ford. That's as big a market cap as General Motors. They haven't delivered cars yet. Tesla's market cap is $1.2 billion. They make 5% the amount of vehicles annually as Volkswagen Group. Why are they valued at 1.2 trillion? Sorry. It's because they've captured for the investment community the imagination of what's possible. What's possible in transportation once we electrify? For me, it's not about the batteries. For me, it's not about the powertrain. We're going to build a car to demonstrate that. But within it, that vehicle goes from 40 volts to 800 volts. 800 volts, so you can imagine the type of technology that 800 volts is can platform. So the Prime Minister, once he challenged us to do this, we did it. A couple of months ago before the election said, look, how do you feel about us saying by 2035 we want to mandate 100% zero-emission vehicles? And I said, you shouldn't be talking to the car guys. For us, we'll engineer to whatever specs anybody wants. Should be talking to the energy people. We should be talking to the grid distributors. We should be talking to people who set building codes. If we all plugged in electric vehicles today, we'd blow the transformer across the street. We'd overload the transmission station down the street. We've got a lot of work to do before we get there. I said, you need to talk to the mining people. Someone's got to get the lithium out of the ground. You're going to talk to the banking people. Someone's got to do that. Someone's got to pay for that and expect a return. In Canada, we have North America's biggest and one of the world's biggest resources of all the raw materials and the rare earths that are going to be required to make these batteries. Just as important, in Toronto, we have, in 2021, the Global Center of Artificial Intelligence. And in Montreal, we have the Global Center of Machine Learning. We have the second biggest IT cluster in North America in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, only after Silicon Valley, and we make more cars and parts than Michigan. We've got all the elements to make it work. What does that future look like? Why should it matter to people like you? And where can Canada play? Well, I took some auto people who make seats and make bumpers and make roof liners, and I took them to the Perimeter Institute in Kitchener-Waterloo, and we sat with some theoretical physicists, and one of them said to us, Do you understand the concept of quantum imaging? You know, you saw this great presentation by Jordan on special effects. It's great what the imagination can do with CGI and present to you on a screen. Can you imagine now that I can display to you an opaque image and put it up between us where you can't see me and I can't see you, but it's something I'm projecting that isn't actually there? He said, well, that technology exists. And I said, now if you think about it in terms of the transportation grid and a zero-emission transportation grid and a promise made by General Motors, said, we will deliver on zero emissions, but we promise you zero collisions. How does the world change? Well, if you've got an 800-volt platform, you're now platforming cameras, sensors, LiDAR. Great LiDAR company. Keep your ears open for a company called LeddarTech out of Quebec City with offices here in Montreal. They're going to be the world leaders in LiDAR. We're going to be able to guarantee that vehicles don't hit each other, they don't hit pedestrians, they can avoid hazards in the street, and they can work with an intelligent transportation system so that not only are they connected and autonomous, not only are they able to turn inward to the driver and the passengers of the vehicle as a caregiver, we can guarantee that the safety systems of the past that have to be built into a vehicle, the crumple zones, the bumpers, the design of the front and the back, are all going to change. Because if they don't touch each other, then we won't need all that steel and all that aluminum and all that plastic. And your vehicle shrinks closer and closer, the core product, to the transportation pod that you sit in. And in that transportation pod, if you layer on that quantum imaging, you can make that look like anything you want it to look like. You know, today we have automotive designers who are designing vehicles for different segment levels, a $25,000 vehicle, 40, 60, SUVs, sports cars. You know, I saw a report yesterday where we're talking about customer attitudes with vehicles, and people with the means, when they buy vehicles, they say the vehicle is the avatar that I choose to show people who I am. Well, wouldn't it be amazing if we used some of Jordan's work to project your avatar, designed for you, custom designed for you, from your vehicle using quantum imaging, while you sit in a vehicle that, you know, the passengers face each other, they spin. The vehicle arrives when you need it to arrive, and then when it's done with you, it goes to somebody else. A vehicle that is zero emissions, a vehicle that charges not by plugging in, but by induction charging, that we build into the charging infrastructure, into the regular infrastructure in the world. Pull up to a light, and your vehicle's getting charged. Sounds a little bit science fiction, but it isn't. That technology exists today. The question is, can we deploy it profitably? Can municipalities and provinces and states and countries afford it? We're banking through Project Arrow that not only can they afford it, they'll have no choice but to do things like that. And 2035 is 2 automotive generations away. What are our hopes on this project? What are our hopes for this country? We have maybe the most kilometers of road per capita on the planet. We have, in the G7, the biggest stretch of climate extremes from July in Toronto at 35 degrees Celsius and 100% humidity to minus 50 and alert. You know, those of you who live in Montreal, I think you probably define the spectrum of climate changes here. We need flexible vehicles, and we have vehicles that rely very much so on their systems to cool and to heat them. We have roads that crumble. I love Montreal, but I don't love driving on Montreal roads. They crumble because you go from freeze to heat, and where we are on asphalt and concrete technology is where we are. With Project Arrow, we're trying to demonstrate not just the vehicle itself. That's easy. You know, we all had electric vehicle toys. We all have fans in our rooms. Those motors are made dime a dozen. This is a technology platform. This is a lighthouse. This is a project in which we hope that Canada can explain to the world that it can play on those no collision environments, on that quantum imaging, that connected technology that then allows for you, if you can imagine, you have an autonomous vehicle, a vehicle that stretches the spectrum of the amount of time in your driving career you can drive. Right now we say 16-year-olds can go get their learner's permit. In a year we will then permit them to drive fully licensed on the road, and then when they get to 80 years old we're going to test their sight, we're going to test their abilities. We're also going to control for whether you have any chronic conditions, whether you are just coming out of a health emergency where we might take your license from you. In a vehicle like this, in the vehicles that we're all going to drive in the future, in vehicles that Canadian technology plays very well on, we will be building into the Aero a vehicle as a caregiver posture. If you're driving and it's sensing your vitals going into a place that require a little bit of care, can redirect where you're going, change the climate within the vehicle. Intelligent seats, some of you have been in vehicles that are massage seats. You can program anything you want into those seats. It can call ahead. It can extend your driving life if you start to become, if you have chronic cardiac conditions or if you have vision conditions. And frankly, it'll stretch it for everybody. It'll stretch our ability to share those vehicles, but stretch how we behave in them. The vehicle itself, right now, so we've got our design and we're working on the renderings, and we were able to convince the chief engineer of Aston Martin to leave his job full-time to be our chief engineer. And so if you go and watch the new Bond film and you open that first scene and you see the Aston Martin DB5 in those chases, well, Fraser just finished doing those DB5s on BMW platforms, left that job, left a job where he built the world's most advanced internal combustion engine supercar, the Aston Martin Valkyrie. And now you can come and see him in Oshawa at Ontario Tech University, working with our friends down in Windsor Essex VR Cave to bring to life the Aero. A real car with a real deadline, with real milestones, is not the way the current auto market is launching new vehicles. We're doing it with images, we're doing it with PowerPoints, and we're going out and doing capital raises. What we've decided to do was, we're going to source this entire vehicle from Canada, in Canada, with Canadian talent. Under Fraser's tutelage, we also recruited the Chief Technology Officer, former Chief Technology Officer of McLaren Automobiles, to come in and oversee how we lightweight the vehicle. We've got industry experts on this, and a vehicle that is going to be delivered 1 year from now, and we'll do an unveiling event in Canada before we bring it to the Consumer Electronics Show. You'll be able to sit in it, you'll be able to drive it, it'll drive itself, it'll show you what we can do in Canada. And we think that for the 2025 model year and the 2026 model year, there is enough capital interest that someone is going to take this over the line. I run a trade association. We're industry advocates. We're a not-for-profit. I'm not going to raise the $1 billion required to make a car company, but there is $1 billion worth of interest in this. Who are the players that we'd like to be involved here? Well, we certainly would like the federal government to be involved here, and not from a function of please capitalize our investment. We've got private money, that's not an issue. It's let's take this project that we shamelessly borrowed the branding from the Avro Aero and show the world that we can and we will support local talent and local technology and local content, and demonstrate that Canada can, even though we only own 2% of the global market, be a leader in the transportation sector. In 1954, the federal government, through the Department of National Defense, said, look, the biggest threat that we have in the Cold War is the Russian bombers coming over top of Canada to bomb the Americans. And with a clean sheet, we want you to come up with the fastest, highest flying bomber interceptors that you can find. Come back to us with the engineering designs, we'll worry about the price after. In this country, a company called Avro came up with the Aero, which you saw, of course, in my intro video, and it is the nod for the inspiration of this project. I've been asked numerous times, why would you pick an airplane project, a fighter jet project, that met an ignominiable end when the Canadian government decided to cancel it and then chop up all the technology and fire 30,000 people in one day? Well, on the day that they fired it, NASA called the engineering department and hired 20 engineers from Canada that moved down to Langley, Virginia, that put Americans in space in the Mercury programs and put Americans on the moon in the Apollo program. They called the Orenda engine engineers and the Delta Wing engineers and said, we have a project a top secret project in the UK about a supersonic passenger airplane. And so Avro Aero engineers went on to build the Concorde. What we did as a country when we had a clean sheet before that sheet was yanked from us was extraordinary. We built the highest flying jet on the planet, twice as high as the Russian MiGs, and that flew in its test flights with its test engine twice as fast as those MiGs or anything the Americans had, with a second generation going to fly 5 times as fast. Those engineers deserve a legacy that is a tribute from the transportation sector and automotive. The Aero is a clean sheet. What we've said to people is, bring us your best. We'll fund it. Bring us your best technology. Bring us your best batteries. Bring us your best drivetrain technology. Bring us your best intelligence systems. Show us how you would set up an interior of a vehicle that doesn't collide with anything. Show us how you would design a vehicle or you would supply a vehicle that is equipped with artificial intelligence and machine learning. With all the cameras and sensors on this vehicle, with all the cameras and sensors going on intelligent infrastructure on a go-forward basis, these vehicles are going to generate terabytes of data. The winners in the automotive space, the winners in a zero-emission and zero-collision environment, are going to be the ones that can use the system or the systems within the vehicles themselves to crunch all that data in real time and make it actionable. Bring us your best skunkwork technology. Show me what you can't sell to Ford and bring it to the Aero. Just make sure that it's Canadian. Bring me your best battery technologies. There's a battery technology player here called Volta Explore, which is a joint venture of a Quebec company called Nano Explore that is bringing us graphene-enhanced lithium batteries. For those of you who follow that space, of course, Tesla has the best range currently for batteries in a vehicle, 550 miles or so. And some of their competitors like Lucid has said, well, we think we've beat that by 100 miles. Well, we're going to try to do something a little better than that. We're going to try to do something with this Quebec company, but also we have some solid-state battery options that may bring us into the 1,000-kilometer range. One of the companies that came forward in this project and is why we call this project the Lighthouse, and what makes it exciting for me from a climate change perspective, is a company called Summit Nanotech in Fort McMurray, Edmonton, and Calgary, using nanotechnology to extract salt and brine from the brine water from oil and gas extraction and to turn it into lithium, usable lithium cells. If it works and is scalable, it'll have an application in automotive. But it is also a window into one of the things that we need to do in this country, which is to not ignore the natural resource, oil and energy, infrastructure, and industries of the West that have contributed to all the things that we want to do in Central Canada and Eastern Canada, which will be orphaned through this zero-emission vehicle environment. As we get to the unveiling of this vehicle next year, as we get to potentially the production and the launching of Canada's first automobile company since the 1920s and 1930s, we need to plan for Canada in 2035. And one of the things that the Aero has done is brought 430 companies in there and brought all 3 levels of government from every province and territory in this country to a table, a Canadian automotive partnership table. Labor's there, Academia is there, and we are actively discussing and planning and looking forward to how do we get there with all the partners intact. When you leave here or on your way here, if you were driving, you may have stopped at a gas station. All of those assets will be stranded in the 2030s and the 2040s. We have a background in real estate development. If you are trying to, if you're buy a piece of property for redevelopment, for use for residential use, the last place that you want to use is a gas station, under which the ground has been contaminated over the last 40, 50 years. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could then partner with Esso and Shell and Petrocan and all the other gas station suppliers to be the place where we all go and charge our vehicles? Let me bring this to a summary and tell you about where we are going to be next, and maybe next year we come back here with this vehicle. We are starting at the actual build phase, and if you go to projectaero.ca, you will start to see in January, February, March, all of the major components start to come into place. We will be announcing who our supply partners are. We're fully financed. This vehicle has just execution risk, has no financial risk. We will, in July and August and September of next year, start to tour our virtual experience tour, where you can put on the VR goggles and we'll put you in the vehicle and take you around. And sometime in November and December next year, we'll have a car. And that car will be out on Canadian roads first. We're going to show everybody what we can do here in Canada. And then we're going to take it to the biggest consumer electronics show on the planet, CES in Las Vegas, where we have demonstrated technology, award-winning technology, for the last 7 years. And it'll go on a global tour. And hopefully, it will inspire some of the discussions about Canada's place in this world, Canada's place in transportation, Canada's place in climate change, and what technology from cities like this can do to help the world switch over to a zero carbon footprint and a zero emissions footprint and a zero collision footprint in the future for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know, do you have a few minutes to spend
Please.
taking some questions from the audience?
Sure. Do you have a mic there?
Yes.
Sure.
I invite you to come and see it. It seems like we already have 2 or 3 questions here, so obviously this struck a chord.
Thank you.
So, first question. I'm about to change and buy a new car, and a friend told me to get a non-electric one as it might be my last chance. Are we really moving that fast?
Yes. Yes. Actually, I just bought a car right now, and it's a non-electric one, and I said that this will be my last one.
Okay.
And all the countries in the world, the major countries in the world, the major markets, Japan, US, China, Europe, Canada, have all said that they will go to zero-emission vehicle full mandates in the 2030s, but we also have a roadmap that by 2025 and 2030, this is what those percentages will look like. All the car companies in the world are falling over themselves to make electric vehicles.
Right.
General Motors said, we're going to make all electric vehicles by 2030. Well, Ford said, we'll do it too. Jaguar said, we'll do it by 2025. And as a former owner of a Jaguar, I'm glad they're doing something to make sure they start.
Right. Okay. It's a competitive space for sure. I have another question here that's asking about the talent bottlenecks in this process. It sounds like you have a lot of talent around the table, but are there any challenges that you're experiencing in skills that need to be developed or anything of that nature?
It's a very competitive world, and when you have an audience that watches the Jordan's presentation on FX, you sit there and you say, look, I've got the skill set for FX. Am I going to go into FX or am I going to go into automotive design? And so we've got to make products and projects and processes that are interesting for talented individuals like that. And we're hoping that Project Aero for car geeks is inspiring, and certainly the door is open.
Great. This other question from the audience is, do you expect governments to give more incentives for people to switch into electric-powered vehicles?
We're seeing governments around the world do that. Here in Quebec, there's obviously a very healthy one.
Yeah.
We're going to see a lot of them. But the peril in those incentives is twofold. Number one, look, when the market is 3%, currently 3% of buyers buy electric vehicles, and you want to push it to 4, 5, 6%, that might cost a government, a region, $100 million.
Oh.
That's fine. I think we have it. We can go with it. But if your target is 100%, then we're into the tens of billions of dollars. So is that tens of billions of dollars better deployed into the technology, supporting those jobs, creating those jobs, inspiring young people to be in it? I think that there are probably better uses after we get past that first 5-10%.
Okay, you touched on something that I wanted to talk about in terms of getting young people into these jobs. I think maybe some people in the audience were a little surprised, to see someone from the auto industry. You don't think automatically auto and tech, but where can they get into this space, and why is it important for them to think about this space in terms of having a fulfilling career?
That's really the biggest challenge in our industry. I'm starting to become an old man. My daughter's in the audience here studying in McGill, and the guy in the mirror looks older than the guy inside.
Okay.
And I'm trying to figure out, her younger brother is 16, and 5-6 months he doesn't have his driver's license.
Right.
I would have camped out at the transportation office. In the past, you'd get into a vehicle because it was your freedom. You can go see your friends, you can go see places. Today, we're all on these $1,000 devices that connect us to the world at all times. So how do we interest people?
Right.
We need to interest them in technology, but I think that young people see the automotive sector and they think factories, dark lit factories, and old men. And the reality is that, when we did this competition, we could have hired any design studio in the world. We're partners with Pininfarina, which is Ferrari's designer of 90 years, and they're going to help us do a micro-mobility piece. But what we thought was important was we wanted design submissions from students.
Right.
And our 7 finalists, there were 3 young women and 4 young men who were industrial designers who didn't sign up for an automotive program, who said, oh, this is kind of cool, I'll design a car. And at some point, I should release all 26 submissions because it looked amazing, and I thought it was inspiring.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the message is that, there are opportunities in this space, even if you don't think about them right away when you're taking IT or you're in school, but they are out there.
If you think about that going from 40 volts to 800 volts, anything electronically powered that you think can be passenger-facing or road-facing, those are going to be incredible jobs. Our challenge will be that it's very difficult to put it in real terms for someone who's 18, 19, 20 and say, look, you can make $100,000 in this space in your second, third year if you find the right place. Because, we in this industry is very weighted in old men. I'm getting there, so I can say it and I can see it. And I don't know that we speak the language of the people we need to recruit.
Right.
But if you're enterprising, young, ambitious student, and you go and make those calls, I'm going to tell you that the auto sector is going to look crazier than that the FX sector in 5-10 years.
Okay. We have a couple questions here that are sort of dancing around the same subject. We have someone asking about the ecological impacts to build this car. And Charles is asking, how do we make sure not to have a shortage of raw materials necessary for producing the batteries, like as we've had with oil? So I'm hoping you can address sort of both of those ecological and material challenges.
Well, those are very thoughtful questions, and it's one of the things that we discussed and put into action on this project specifically. What we said was, give me your best technology, propose your best technology, but then also explain to us the process of manufacturing. There's a company called Electrovaya in Mississauga that makes some great lithium-ion batteries. Their energy density is fantastic. We want to work with them specifically because their manufacturing process in the factory is zero emissions. And we want to be able to get to a zero emissions vehicle without incurring 20% emissions in the manufacture. Can we do it? Right now, the answer is I don't think anybody can do it.
Okay.
But unless you're targeting it and then using that same kind of entrepreneurial spirit to decarbonize your factories and your processes, we'll never get there.
Yeah. Don't know until you try, right?
That's right, and we're trying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. One thing that really struck me about your presentation was that you really got everyone on board from across the country, it sounds like. And I was curious because, the switch is going to take a lot of social behavioral changes. And, I was thinking to myself with the opening slide, somewhere in Alberta, what are you sensing in terms of the culture of the different regions in Canada embracing this? Alberta is an interesting place to be manufacturing this car and to have a car like this. Are you feeling or seeing any resistance, or are there any challenges on like a social level in Canada to pick this up and make it work?
Yeah, I think we need to be very thoughtful about what a future of zero emissions means for the future of people in Alberta. And we've relied on that, on the profits from the oil industry for years to help build the rest of this country. You've got generations of people who were able to raise a family on really good incomes there. How do they get there? Consumer tastes in Alberta are very interesting. We're finding a lot of consumer choice take-up. The younger generations in Alberta being really into zero emissions, zero collisions, zero everything. There are no real easy answers, and some of the things that we thought we should do is, if we're going to put federal money into this, part suppliers don't need federal money, but maybe the transition for those oil companies, those gas stations to become charging stations, maybe there's a partnership that needs to happen there. And we really were buoyed by a company like Summit Nanotech that I didn't know existed before we lit this lighthouse, and said they're looking at it and saying, look, if the brine water from oil and gas can be converted into batteries, maybe we can work with the oil sector and the petroleum refiners, with companies like Porsche, who is now working on, they declared publicly, a 95% carbon-free synthetic fuel. Can we do that? Can we help the transition? I think we all just shouldn't be naive about the fact and say we can get to our objective and no one's going to get hurt, and it's going to happen in 15 years. Someone's going to get hurt, and maybe some of those processes have to be a little bit longer. But as long as we have a national approach on it, we do have the means in this country to do anything we want. Great.
Well, magically time has appeared on the clicker here. I do have another question from someone in the audience, if we can address it quickly. You're talking about Canada's competitiveness in a global economy. Which countries are with us or are behind us in embracing this change? And what do you think it's going to take to sort of close that gap?
I think we're behind.
We're behind.
We're behind. Ironically, if you narrow the scope and you say who's number one in electric vehicles, it's also the world's worst polluter, China.
Right.
On the broadest approach, where we should take examples are from Germany and Japan. And a country I like to always talk about is Sweden.
Okay.
Here's a tiny country, 7 million people, obviously socially progressive. Them and Norway. The Norwegians are a petro country. They have a wide group of public policies for EV adoption.
Yeah.
And in such a small market, they built 3 car companies.
Right.
If they can do it, why can't we?
Right. Okay, cool. And I'm very curious, this is just my own personal question, but, obviously, you've got a huge amount of competition. You mentioned Tesla. I'm curious, why, how much you are looking at what Elon Musk is doing, how much you're looking at what that company is doing as a model, or are you really trying to go your own way?
It's funny, everybody asks, so how are you going to compete with Tesla? We're not. We're inspired by them.
Okay.
And we think that Tesla makes 500,000 cars a year in a global market that makes 100 million cars a year.
Right.
It's the other 99.5% whose market share is going to erode.
Right.
They'll erode because consumers think that they make vehicles that aren't in tune with what we want or what the mandates are. And they've got to retire billions of dollars of investments in internal combustion powertrains, so they got to carry that cost. they've got a whole bunch of legacy costs that new players don't.
Right.
And if Aero makes it across the line as a car company or just inspires others in Canada to do the same, it's a success for us. I never started this by saying we're going to launch a car company, and I really do think that the best people to take it across the line is somebody other than me.
Okay.
I'm an industry advocate. I'm not a car maker, but I'm happy to incubate the first $25 million of investment to make sure that somebody's got something to go with.
Great. Well, now we are out of time, but thank you so much, Flavio, for coming and chatting about your vision. And maybe next year when I see you at Campus Party, you'll be here with the vehicle. That would be cool.
We will 100% bring the car here and let people ride and touch and feel, and hopefully it inspires a whole bunch of young people to get involved in the auto industry.
Great. Well, thank you so much. A big round of applause for Flavio. Thank you. See ya. Yeah, that's perfect right there. Great. So our next guest is a best-selling